In this tutorial, I'm going to show you 3-point lighting, which is a technique that uses 3 or sometimes more light sources to create an effect like this. So lighting this car is done with 3-point lighting. Now this is a scene that was created by Peter Fendrick, and really nice model, and the tutorial is actually built into the Cinema 4D help system. So it's actually a really nice tutorial, so that's what we're going to focus on here because it's a great example of this in action, and you get light like this. So to find it, go to the help system, which needs to be installed. If it's not, just do your updates until it is, and then choose show help, search for tutorial. So just type it up here, and then you see a variety of tutorials here, and the ones in this case that we're looking at are light and shadow tutorials, and then lighting fundamentals. So there's loads of tutorials in the help system, but it's quite nice how it explains things. So 3-point lighting is a classic lighting setup, and if you click on there it tells you about it, what a main light is, fill light, backlight, which are the 3 light sources you generally use to create this effect. So the main light does the main lighting of the scene, the fill simulates the bouncing of light, which you could simulate more using a technique called global illumination, but the downside of that is it takes longer to render. And then you have the backlight, which helps to bring the object away from the background, so it just creates kind of like a slight halo effect around it, just to make it pop out a little bit from the scene. So that tells you about that. If we go back one, and then the scene that we've got here is under this part, the illuminating an old timer. So you click on that, and the great thing with these tutorials is they come with the scene files embedded in the help system, and you can just click on them to access them. So this one you can either say, right, I'll start from scratch and I'll start with the raw scene without any lighting, or if you like to dabble with a scene that's already made, there is the final scene here, which simulates this, which you saw as I'd loaded it in the scene. So you can grab that scene, hit render, and it will look like that. So there's a cool couple of things about that. One, you can have it look exactly how they got that look by looking around the scene, which is what I'm going to do in a minute. And the other cool thing is you could replace the model and use your own model in there if you like the lighting that this does, because you've got the basic help there already. So let's get cracking then. So I've loaded this particular scene in Cinema 4D, and then in the help system you just continue, and it tells you about various things. So this example also uses a HDR image, which is a scene that's a photograph that's taken at a series of exposures, and that gives you some lighting data that Cinema 4D can use, and they're also really cool for reflections as well. So it tells you all about that. I'm not going to tell you all about it, you can read about it in the help system, and it also tells you how you get to use them in the scene. So if we click on, and how you can use things like the compositing tag to control how they're utilized in a 3D environment. So you can say, I only want you to be seen by the camera, or I want you to be seen by reflection as well, or I want you to be seen by global illumination, whatever you want. But it tells you how to set the scene up and removes the default lighting from the scene, etc., etc. So it's a really cool tutorial, and how to position the light. There's one thing I noticed in this tutorial that I thought was pretty cool, is there's a mode to set the active object as camera, which is really handy when you're positioning lights in the position that you want them to be, so they're facing your object in a precise way. Really cool for putting the lights like we see here, and also important when you're doing things like spotlights, so you can have the light shine exactly where you want it. So I'll show you that quickly in a minute. And it tells you about things like the softness of the shadow, how you can fine tune area lights, etc., etc., positioning the fill light, blah blah blah. So it's a really nice tutorial, and I'm not going to go all the way through it because it's really easy, covers a lot of ground and tells you about it, but I'm going to show you the basic principle. We'll have a quick look at this scene and explain why the 3-point light is a useful technique. Okay, so back to the scene here that we've got in here. If we have a little look at this scene, we've got 3 null objects here, just saying the copyright was Peter Fendrick. So it was his model, which he kindly allows you to learn from, so you shouldn't use this model in anything, but yeah, you can make use of the lights and other parts of the scene here if you so wish. Okay, so you can see we've got 3 lights here. What I'm going to do is just create a camera in the scene, because this was just using the editor camera and I just want to remember my current view. So I'm just going to rename that main camera. And then if I go to use camera, I'm going to grab the default camera and just move out so we can see the whole scene, and then you can see how this has been set up. So now if we just grab the model tool, we flick between things, we can see we've got a main light, this side light, sorry, not side light, that's like the rim, and a side light here. And then back to our main camera there, so we can move between them. And then we've got the floor, of course. There's also this thing here, this Himmel object. So this is in a foreign language, sorry for that, but this is a big sky, which is currently having a HDR image, which we saw before, and that's being used for the reflections in the scene. And if we have a look at this little tag, this compositing tag, this tells you what's happening at the minute. It's not being seen by the camera, so we can't see it anywhere, but it is being seen by rays, GI if you've got that on, and it's being used by reflection and seen by ambient occlusion if you've got that on as well. If we have a look at the main lights, on the main light, you can see it's that area type light, which gives lovely soft shadows and nice gentle lighting. The light is just set pretty standard on a basic white light. And then you can go into the various things and see whether anything else has been tweaked, like you can change the shadows and blah, 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 but it looks pretty standard to me. So pretty simple. And then you've got the same things for these. So I think these are all, let's just check, all set at 100% intensity as well. Of course, you could change those. You can also go up beyond 100% if you want a bit more light in the scene and you don't want to add more lights. So we'll have a quick look at that in a minute. One of the things I wanted to point out though was this really nice object, set active object as camera, so you can check where a light is currently positioned, and that's here. You go cameras, and then I'm saying it's cameras. Is it cameras? Sorry, there. It's right in front of me. Set active object as camera, and then you can look through the light for a bit and check that it's positioned exactly where you want it, and you can flick through your other ones so we can see where these light sources are actually pointing at the minute. So it's a really cool little tool, that. So, and then of course if you wanted a camera in that exact angle, you could create a camera and it would be put there. But it's a nice way of checking things out, and you can also move the light using your normal camera tools, and it's adjusting the light in that sense, and the angles. So if we go back to the, say, the main light, could bring that down a little bit, or whatever you want. And you'll also see if we change this to a different type of light source, like maybe a spot, where this is particularly handy, because you can say, oh, I need it there, and I need the cone to be exactly around the car, that sort of thing. I'm going off tangent here because we were on area lights, but you get the idea. So if we go back to our main camera, there it is. Cool, that made me dizzy. Then you can, just tweak away with this and have a look at what each thing does. Now, a nice thing to do to deconstruct a scene is, which I always like to look at, is what is doing what. And you can do things like turn lights off and see what each one is doing. So if I turn that one off and that one off, you can see the lighting effect that the main light is having. But there's also a bit of work being done by the HDRI image for reflections. So I could turn that off as well. And then we should have a good idea at what each thing is doing. So if we try a render now, I'll just check what render settings I've got. That's okay. You can begin to see what each thing is doing. You could also turn on things like multipass, then we can flick between them. So we'll have a look at that in a minute and see what control we have, because multipass is a really cool tool. But I just wanted to quickly show you, try turning things on, try and turning things off, and have a play around with stuff. So you can see there's the light coming from the main light without anything else on. And then if we turned this back on, so these little icons if you're not sure what these are. The first one controls whether the object is seen in the editor. If it's on grey, it will be seen. The green is to do with if you've got it in a child object, you've got further control using that, and red means it won't be seen. And the bottom one is in the renderer. If you're ever confused about that, just right click on it and choose show help, and you should find some information on the various bits that you're after. What else did I want to tell you about this? So what have we got on there? So we've got the sky on, so we have a quick re-render with that. And I always like re-rendering in the picture viewer as opposed to the main viewer, because you get this nice comparison in the history. So you can start flicking between them and go, okay, the HDRI is basically doing these nice reflections on the windscreen, I think a bit on the bonnet. So it's really helping that pop, and HDRI is really cool for making things like metal with the reflections. So you can see it's adding a lot of stuff to the scene. And then if we turn on, say, the side light, do that one as well. You can see one of the big things about this is the speed at which it renders. It's really quick, and which makes it good for when you're learning about these subjects. It's not too complicated, whereas if you start messing with things like global illumination with interiors, you can be waiting a long time. Whereas 3-point lighting is much quicker, and you've got a lot of control over how things are doing. So we've got another one, and then the last one. And the cool thing with the render, you can see how each of these things is adding. So the HDRI, the next light, and then the final light to help give all of the final lighting in the scene. So it's a pretty nice result there, as you can see. Okay, some other things that I just wanted to point out about lighting and rendering as we're going along is there's various things you can turn on and off when you're working on a scene to help speed things up. So if you go into your render settings, which is Command B or Control B on a PC, you can go in and this one, options, and play around with things to get faster results with the rendering, just while you're basically getting everything set up in your scene. So for example, we could say, only give us 3 ray depth, 2 reflection depth, 3 shadow depth, and give us 50% detail while we're working on the scene. If we re-render now, we should see things speed up a lot in the renderer. Okay, it's going to be simpler, but it should give us a bit of a faster result as well. So it's just a good way of speeding up that render, and then you want to pop it back up when you're ready. So we went from 25 seconds to 16 seconds, just lowering those things. If we compare them, we're seeing a bit of a different result, but it gives a good rough idea of how things are going. You just need to remember to put these back up afterwards as well. So I think it was 6, 4 and 6. You can also do things like save those render settings, or you could create a new child of your current render settings. So I could say, okay, I want to call this, basic preview settings. And then I could say, okay, now I'm going to have those as the simple ones. And then you can see I can pick which ones I'm going to use. And it's just a nice way of having quick previews of things without having to wait for everything, because I'm not bothered about the detail of the model while I'm adjusting the lighting. So it's a good little thing to do. The other thing I was going to talk about was multipass. If we turn that on, we can do things like separate lights. We can have materials, image layers, all sorts of stuff. And these are cool to have on because you can then see what is going on in your scene. So if we do a render now, in the layers, we can then see what each thing is doing and try turning things on and off. If we look at the multipass image, you've got to turn the multipass image on here, and then you can start seeing, that's doing that, and that's doing that. Now this is one of Cinema 4D's massive features that I just absolutely love, because you can see what everything is what everything is doing in your scene. So it's a great way of learning, but you can also output this to your favorite compositor. So you can output this in layered format to Photoshop, for example, and then have all of these on separate layers and adjust things as you see fit. So it's a really cool way of working in the scene and checking what each thing is doing. So we can see there's no caustics in this scene, there's no global illumination, there's no ambient occlusion, because I've just put all of these on. But if there were, so things like refraction, look at that, there's a bit of refraction, there's a bit of reflection, and you can do things like adjust that. So we could say, tone that down, highlight it up. Of course, one of the most popular things is going to be shadows. Not that one, is it? In unfold here, there you go, there's the shadow from the main light. So okay, you know what, that's a bit harsh, let's tone that down. And you can do exactly the same in Photoshop, or you can do it in Cinema 4D's picture viewer as well. But I just wanted to point that out, because an important factor of rendering is you don't have to get the most perfect lighting straight off. If you've got these files, you can tweak this in your image editor, and it's much quicker than sitting and waiting for re-renders. Now, of course, here we've only taken 20 seconds to do this render, but if you were doing a big, huge, complicated image, it might take hours to render, and you'll still have this control. And multipass is no slower than a standard render, so you may as well have the information on and use it if you wish. The only other thing you need to remember is, if you want to use that, on the save page, choose an option that's got layers, so like Photoshop PSD format, for example. You can also have things like alpha channels, and then where you want to save it, so that sort of thing. You can also do the same thing with the likes of After Effects, so it's a really cool option to have, but I just wanted to point that out while you're playing around. Now we've got a bit off-piste with the 3-point lighting, but you get the idea. And then in terms of the lighting tutorial, the only things that we didn't really show, which the tutorial talks about, is this HDRI image. And Cinema 4D, if you have the full version, or Visualize, if you go and Visualize we're in the content browser here. In the presets, you have light setups, HDRI, and there are a few to get you started. And these have been applied to a sky object in the scene on a material. So you can see here's the material that's been used here. This is using HDRI 15. Is it one of these? Whoops. Might not be one of these, but it'll be hiding somewhere. And it's been put in the luminance and reflectance. But if I drag and drop one of these in the material manager, we can see same thing, luminance, reflectance, and you can turn those on and off. You can say what it does. So that's being used to create the highlights in the scene. The reflections, which we saw in the multipass, and then the area lights that we saw. These ones here, you can create your own just here. So you drag here an area light, or you can just start with an ordinary light, go through the different light settings and set them. So you don't have to use area lights for 3-point lighting, but it does give very nice gradients to shadows, and very realistic shadows. So that combined with the area shadows and nice fall off of the light. But you can use any of the other options. And if you want to learn about lights, if you go to the help system and go tutorial again. Whoops, there we go. Tutorial, light, there we go. There's this here, light sources and types of light. And it shows you default light, boring light, omni light, how it works, what it does. That's like a light bulb would be, spotlight, different types of spotlight. So the help system's really cool. I just want to bang this home, because often we go, let's go on YouTube, or let's go learn on a video tutorial, but the old help system is actually pretty useful, and gives a lot of detail that's often missed. So you can see it goes very technical on certain topics. There's also things like IES lights, so it's well worth having a look through all of these tutorials for that process. So yeah, that was the main things I wanted to cover in here, to give you an idea of the lighting and positioning stuff. So we saw how you can position a light in the scene. Just for a bit of practice though, let's say I wanted to recreate the main light. So I'd grab the light here, cameras, set object as camera, and then just move it around. So I'm using 1 to move up and down, 2 to move forwards and backwards, and 3 to rotate. like so. And then that's similar to the other light in the scene, the main light. So I could turn that off and say, you know what, this is my main light now. And then the help system will tell you, but turn on area shadows. And if we turn these off, we'll see what effect that's having on the scene on our original camera. Which one was it? That one. And that quick, you can start working on the lighting for your scene. And then you just add the other lights as you see fit. You can rename them. If you wonder how things are renamed, that's really simple. You just double click on it. So I can call that main light. You could even change the German to the right things, or I think it's German. Himmel object sounds like it is. But yeah, that is 3-point lighting. You can also use this lighting in conjunction with other lighting as well. So you could use the main light and then use global illumination, so you don't have to use the other bits. Global illumination is a big subject. There's lots of settings though, and that's really for another tutorial. But hopefully this has been useful to you. So you've learned a bit about 3-point lighting and why it's cool. And yeah, we'll cover other lighting setups and rendering in other tutorials. Thanks very much for watching.